Hello, 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 and welcome into episode 8 of the Bear Claw Media Podcast. I am Chris Bolin and joined by Ben Schleiger, as I always am. How you doing, Ben?
Oh, pretty good. I mean, we didn't have a Bears loss to talk about this week, so saved me a little heartache.
Yeah, without that Bears loss, I don't think I can think of one single noteworthy event that happened over the weekend. Do you have anything, Ben?
Well, yeah, we actually do have a little bit of news in our neck of the woods. We'll be expecting a little Henry Thomas, March 24.
Hell yeah, dude, that's so exciting. I'm so happy for you and Mariah. Was boy what you were looking for? Like, I'm sure love it either way, but deep down.
Honestly, we were good either way. I mean, first one, no pressure, because you're gonna get what you're gonna get. So we're just happy it's a healthy baby. But always kind of love that storybook, older brother protector type deal. So we'll see. Either way, we're happy, and I'm sure this won't be our last.
Dude, I'm so happy for you. That's awesome. Like, congratulations, seriously.
Thank you, thank you. And then also noteworthy this week is the wife's birthday. Happy birthday, wifey, and also happy birthday, Jack. His was on the 5th, and then we got a big birthday. Mama Schleiger has her
Ooh.
birthday this Thursday, so happy birthday, Mom.
Oh, nice. Where are you guys doing anything fun? Oh, you're
Yeah.
out of town, aren't you?
Well, I'll be in Casper on Thursday for the usual grind for work, but yeah, other than that, we'll be celebrating at the Bears game, hopefully.
Oh, nice.
We'll see if we can get a win for Mama Schleiger.
We'll see. Well, celebrating may be the word that's up in the air.
Right.
Um, but yeah, without a UNC game, that kind of frees us up to talk about the rest of the Big Sky, some teams that the rest of the country are probably more interested in. But even then, with that bye, it was a pretty light week in the Big Sky. Just 3 games, 3 road winners, which I guess wasn't necessarily that terribly surprising, but thought it was noteworthy. I guess unless you want to start somewhere else, Montana 31 over UC Davis 23. I said that about as poorly as I could. Montana won 31-23 over UC Davis. Go, Ben, please save me.
We love to dog on Montana, but we also know UC Davis is a roller coaster. And as much as Montana's been getting hate in the top 25 polls around the country for getting slot voted and whatnot, at the end of the day, they're 5-1 now. So, I mean, you can't hate that. Some of those wins might have been pretty sketchy, but at the end of the day, the Grizz, I don't even know if they're turning around necessarily because, again, like beating a roller coaster team only by 8, like not necessarily a barn burner. So I mean, yeah, I don't believe in that Montana offense quite yet, but I think switching over to Clifton McDowell, that might give them a little bit more emphasis on their offense because their offense has just been atrocious, especially at home. So kind of a road game might have been what they needed to kind of flip things around. McDowell had 292 yards of total offense, 3 touchdowns, 243 of it was passing, 49 on the ground. That reporter got just roasted by Bowie Hauk for his, asking if Vidlak was going to be the answer or whatnot. And, he better go say sorry to that guy because putting McDowell in, I mean, it just makes sense at this point.
Yeah, if you just treat a question just that as like stupid as how treated that question, I feel like you have to stay with the starter for at least like a full half, you know. But it seems like they trust McDowell a lot more. Whether him or Vidlak's the more talented guy, it seems like they're willing to open the offense up a little more with McDowell under center. But I think this one probably inspired a little bit more confidence in Montana for me than it did for you. It sounds like I still don't really know what to think. Like you said, UC Davis has been a roller coaster. and my opinion of them has also been a roller coaster. I was kind of low on them when the season started, and then there was a chunk of time where I thought they're probably the third best team in the conference, and then with the last few weeks, they've looked like they're going to finish about 500 in the Big Sky, and that's kind of where I think I had Montana too. So I guess this result makes sense, and maybe I'm talking myself out of my Montana belief as we go. But I mean, it's a good win nonetheless. Get the Grizzlies back on track. Maybe quiet the fan base a little bit. But you're right, they're 5-1, and it does not feel like that. It feels like
And it
Rome is
feels like
burning.
every stretch of the way, there's a little something somewhere that like kind of gives them a pass. Like this week, UC Davis, I'm not even sure how many running backs are actually healthy on their roster. But obviously, Lan Larison wasn't available for this game. Not sure on the status of his injury. I think Tubbs at the club might have a little bit of a lead on that. But yeah, I don't think it was I don't think it was a fair performance from UC Davis, even though they are a roller coaster and they stayed true to their nature by having just a weird amount of running back injuries in the last couple weeks. This might have been different if Lan Larison is out there. So again, Montana survives, and at the end of the day, they have only lost once. So numbers don't lie, but they don't look great either.
I guess one last thing, Miles Hastings for UC Davis. Without a running back, he kind of needed to step up, and he did just about all he could. 31 for 46, 359 yards, and a pair of touchdowns. Just wasn't quite enough for the Aggies. Then I guess this one didn't feel that surprising to me. Maybe the score differential, but the result wasn't super surprising, but kind of based on where these teams were projected, it was. Northern Arizona went into Ogden and just took it to Weber State 27-10. So Ben, are Weber State frauds? I guess what, I don't know where else to go from that. And I guess by frauds, are they another 500 team in the Big Sky?
I mean, everybody was giving Montana guff, but Montana's still winning. Weber's not getting nearly as much guff, and they're losing, and almost lost to us. So it was an ugly game. I mean, not exactly a winner, a winning performance from either quarterback, especially Weisler. Like, not exciting at all. 19 for 30 for 119, no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Sacked 3 times. Like, that's not great. Adam DeMonte didn't do much better, but at least he got a touchdown and 1 less pick. Like, it's just weird. Like, Weber State should be good. They have the ability to be good. But they were able to limit Chris Jackson. That's something that we couldn't do. And Jamin Bankston, the big time running back for them, he didn't even participate in this game. So running backs are going down in a hurry across the Big Sky. So if you're a running back and you want to go for running back of the year in Big Sky, your competition your window just widened.
Yeah, just
By
playing all the
margin.
games.
Chris Jackson having a down game, Bankston not playing, Larison not even in the UC Davis game, not even half the running backs available for UC Davis. Yeah, this is a good time for somebody to break out. But yeah, this was just an ugly game.
And I guess so. On the flip side of is Weber for our Weber frauds, is how good is this Northern Arizona team? Because we, along with many others, got some good laughs off on their account after that Utah Tech game. It really felt like this was a year, like that was one of the teams that was beatable for UNC, even when with where they're at. But I mean, ever since Big Sky Conference play started, Northern Arizona flipped a switch. They beat Montana, then they just lost by 1 to Sac State last week, and then put it on Weber State. I was gonna get a little spicy and see if NAU had a chance at making the playoffs, which they probably still do. But when I kind of got into their schedule, they host Portland State and host UC Davis. Both those are winnable. Then they're at Montana State, which is probably a loss, and then host UNC and Eastern Washington down the stretch. Again, both of those are winnable. So if they finish 4-1, 3-2 for the rest of the way, they'll be around 500. But there's a chance they finish 6-2 in the Big Sky, which I guess there was, what was there, one? Was it the coaches poll where NAU got one receiving votes preseason? I think we need to apologize to that guy. Whoever voted
Right.
that. I'm sorry I was making fun of you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, looking at the schedule, Portland State, UC Davis, according to what they've done so far this season, like those are winnable. Montana State and Bozeman, I think we have to guarantee that a loss. Like, unless these guys come out and try to do some Case Cookus hero type stuff, I don't see it. Versus us, I'd love to say that we're gonna win that game. I know rubber stamped it. We just got to win a game first before we can get back on that rubber stamp. And at Eastern Washington, definitely tough team. In Cheney, weird atmosphere. Last game of the season, senior day for them. That's a tough one too.
It feels
Six
it
and
feels like that Eastern Washington game and maybe UC Davis are realistically, like, I feel like you hope to split those two, because those are, I feel like both of those are probably toss ups. I mean, with how UC Davis has looked, I mean, without half their running back room, that one, see, I'm sure Northern Arizona would be favored in that one, but that's kind of where, between that and the Eastern Washington game, that's where I feel like that second loss may come in.
yeah, and I hate to say it, but the 1 point loss at Sac State, that might be the deciding factor whether or not they got into the playoffs this year. Because if they run the rest of their table and only lose to Montana State, if they had won either Sacramento State or North Dakota, I think they're probably one of the last four in the bracket. At this point, with them having those losses, and unless they do some hero stuff and beat Montana State and Eastern Washington, I think they're going to be first four looking in. So they're going to be just on the outside of it.
All right, well, I guess that moves us to the last game of the week, which was Idaho at Cal Poly. Idaho took care of business, 42-14. Is 28-7 at halftime. Not really competitive. I think this is kind of the result just about everyone expected. At least I know I did. What, any thoughts on this one, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of a tame game. Hayden Hatton had a sick trick play where he threw a touchdown for himself. Yeah, this was just another good showing from Idaho. I think that's why it's the Big Sky's favorite vegetable.
Yeah, I think Idaho at this point, they kind of already did with their win over Sac State, but they've securely got themselves as the number 2 team in the Big Sky consensus wise, which I guess moves us into our weekly power rankings. We were talking earlier, and I thought we had the exact same, which is kind of wild because we've been pretty different throughout the year. But I forgot you still have Idaho over Montana State in that number 1 slot, which it makes sense. Idaho hasn't done a single thing to like warrant losing that spot. But other than that, yeah, we see it pretty similar. We got Sac State 3, Eastern Washington 4, Northern Arizona. They moved up 3 spots to number 5 in yours. It was just 1 spot in mine. The Montana, UC Davis. We both have Weber State at 8, which is kind of the last of the like teams that are supposed to be competitive this year. I think that's kind of where they've proven themselves. And then you finally see it my way at the very bottom with Portland State 9, Idaho State 10, UNC 11, and Cal Poly bringing up the rear. Where do you just out of that, where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, even though I might have been more wrong on the pick'ems, you're wrong on the power rankings because Idaho played and Montana State didn't. So it should be the same. But
Fair.
regardless of that, like yeah, we're pretty lined up with everything at this point. You know, even with my coffee creamer type poll, it's it's a consensus. Like there's a great hype video out of Wyoming Cowboys that beat Fresno State this weekend, which is a great game. If anybody needs to see a butt whooping, but they have a cool tagline, and it's like it was always the Pokes, and it's like the bottom four right here. It was always the bottom. Like it was always going to be Portland State, Idaho State, UNC, Cal Poly. We knew that from the beginning. Weber State keeping us company is just kind of sympathetic from that awful game we saw 2 weeks ago. But yeah, this is kind of how it's shaken up. Eastern's kind of taken that spot where we thought Weber might be. Northern Arizona and Montana are kind of like got some weird opposite vibes, like opposite magnets not attracting. It's just kind of like weird vibe there. And then UC Davis, like unfortunately, they kind of fell because of health reasons. So I think it's weird, but the shape of the Big Sky is kind of taking shape.
Yeah, and I think what kind of surprised me the most is that I feel like we kind of look at these things pretty differently in how we approach it, and we still kind of came to the same conclusion, which probably just speaks to the fact that the Big Sky is kind of shaking itself out as the year, kind of like we were expecting as the year went on. Not to say there aren't going to be some interesting results moving forward, but it feels like it held, I guess, for lack of a better term, it held kind of pat this week, or it stayed pat. Um, there is nobody changed my mind too terribly. I think Northern Arizona over Weber confirmed what I was starting to believe. It like made me trust it a little more. But other than that, I think I'm starting to finally get a comfortable grasp on where I feel like these teams are. Surely just in time for something to happen to completely turn it on its head.
Oh yeah, these next couple weeks will definitely be spicy for sure. It'll definitely separate the boys from the men per se. But yeah, I think even though I have Idaho different than you do, I think we're pretty consensus on the fact that it's 1A and 1B. It's just who we give that 0.01 to. Because like
Yeah,
Idaho, like I think their offense is a bit more explosive. I think they have more options in case somebody gets hurt. But at the end of the day, I believe in Montana State's offense more as long as Sean Chambers stays healthy.
yeah, and I mean, luckily we only have I think 2 weeks. They play, or I guess 3 weeks because they play Montana, then they have a bye, and then Idaho plays Montana State. So October 28th, I'll be looking forward to that one. I think the Bears are on the road too, so we won't have to worry about trying to score watch on our phones. Um, yeah, I mean Cal Poly still squarely at the bottom. UNC hasn't done anything. Idaho State, it's tough. It's tough to move too much stuff around with so many teams being on a bye. Were there any other big takeaways? Big Sky wise, anything that stood out to you? Kind of any of these teams you want to talk about a little more before we move on?
I think it's pretty interesting that it's unfair how easily Eastern Washington just reloads at quarterback. Um, they just, even though Kiko Vesperas isn't a world beater, he's still out here doing great things. And they've squarely put themselves in a conversation for spoiler and whatnot. We'll take a look at their playoff potential and whatnot later after this week. Because you got to get past those pesky Cody Hawkin Bengals. But yeah, I mean the next 2 weeks are gonna shape up as like Idaho's gonna get a marquee game against Montana, and then the next weekend, Montana State's gonna get a marquee game against Sac State, and we're gonna see a clear division, a clear decider between who's running for the championship first on the 28th. when those two meet. So that'll kind of be the main event of the whole Big Sky season right there. At least that's how it's shaping up to be. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think it's Montana State and Idaho's conference to lose, and everybody else is just fighting for playoff position at this point.
Yeah, I really can't disagree with anything you said there. Normally, I feel like normally that Montana State game is kind of the main event for the Big Sky season, but it seems like it's happening about a month early this year,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
in Idaho.
to no disrespect to that, that'll still be a roadblock. But I don't know. You know the way Montana's playing. Sure, they have wins, but they're not playing like they're. That's more of like a. Sorry, name's escaping me.
No,
Goliath.
I feel like it's safe to say Montana and Montana State are squarely on different levels this
Yeah.
season. Oh, all right. Well, let's kind of expand our view here to the greater FCS. Uh, Ben, we nailed it with our game of the week, and more accurately, I nailed it because I was right. But Western Carolina and Chattanooga put on just a great game. 52-50. Western Carolina coming out ahead. Just potentially the best game we've seen in the FCS this season. Chattanooga, they scored 53 seconds left, convert the 2-point conversion, take a 1-point lead for 50-49, and Western Carolina just down the field, 3 plays, 60 yards, kicked the field goal. Simple as that. Made it look a lot easier than I'm sure it was. Yeah, it was the highest scoring game, the highest scoring non-OT FCS game this year, and second overall to that. What was it? Towson beat New Hampshire 54-51 earlier this year. But that one took an overtime to get that many points. I've been rambling for a while. Ben, what do you have to say about this one?
Oh man, this one was a heartbreaker. I felt bad for Chattanooga. They're not my team, but they were the team I picked, and oof, they just scored with a little too much time on the clock. They went bold. They didn't want to play overtime. They wanted to take the game and go home with it. And Western Carolina just wasn't having that. Those 3 plays just broke them down. Little chip shot to win it. It's it's one of the better games I think the FCS has been treated to since the 4 or 5 overtime between Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State when they were both here. So I think that's one of the more explosive, big time scoring games that we've been treated to. And yeah, it's just a bummer it had to happen on Chattanooga's homecoming.
I know. Imagine just the like from here to here that those fans went on in that last 50 seconds. It must have been
I mean, like
just
that was like us losing a Weber. Like we were on
honestly.
top of the world, and then we're like exhausted, just want to go home and go to sleep.
Yeah, can I just lay down? Um, yeah. Other than that, Youngstown State, Southern Illinois, I would say was probably the most surprising result. Youngstown State just absolutely put it on them.
Yeah, that was a shellacking we were not ready for. That's going to be one of those games we're going to have to go back and check the film on. Obviously, we're a little busy this weekend, but yeah, that's for a top five team to get smashed like that that's upsetting. You know, there was another top team that did pretty well against FBS is Virginia. They took down William and Mary 27-13, but I mean, as far as things go, that's pretty respectable. William and Mary's offense has had some troubles, some woes the last couple weeks. Virginia's not exciting to any degree, but hey, that's pretty good to put on them. We were hoping for a win though, so maybe a little disappointment, but still a good performance. And then NC Central, they've just been on a tear this season. Usually, kind of just one of those teams, just kind of middle of the pack and whatnot. And they came out and put a 2-score game on Elon. That's pretty impressive. It's you don't usually see HBCU teams climbing the polls very easily, but they're climbing very easily. FAMU's getting a little bit of love in the 20s range. So yeah, NC Central's killing it.
Sweet. Well, is there any other big takeaways we missed from this last week before we get back into the weeds and talk about UNC Sac State next week?
I think Western Carolina and Chattanooga, that was the marquee of the week for sure. Everybody was toting up as 1 versus 2, 4-1 versus 4-1, and it lived up to every second of it.
Yeah, well said. So yeah, let's take a quick break and we will be right back. All right, so Sac State coming to town. It's UNC's homecoming. Unfortunately, there wasn't a great game to pick early in the season. Most of UNC's early home games are against pretty stiff competition. And Sac State, they've been what we kind of expected them to be. They maybe took a bit of a step down from last year. With coach going to Stanford, you kind of expect if the guy who builds it isn't there anymore, it's natural to kind of take a step back, but they're still humming. They probably, I'd say, consensus third best team in the conference. Barely got by NAU, but that seems to be pretty impressive with how NAU's been playing. What are your overall thoughts on Sac State, Ben? Any big, like, what comes to mind?
I mean, you know already what my opinion is of this being homecoming. Darren Dunn, what are you doing, brother? Yeah, I know. There's sometimes you just got to bite the bullet. Homecoming can't be uh, the greatest show that you can put on the whole year. But this is a rough one. I mean, they beat Stanford. They hung close with Idaho, and they toughed it out against NEU. That's kind of a psycho team this year. So, I mean, their one loss is to technically number 7 at the time on our you know our 1 or 2 team in the entire conference. Yeah, it's going to be ugly and greedy. I don't know what to say about it other than we love our Bears, but please don't hurt our Bears.
Yeah, so I had kind of thought, I was like, I wonder when was the last time UNC won a homecoming game, and I expected to kind of have to look back. No, they beat Idaho State last year. Took care of business. But before that, it had been a minute. You have to go all the way back to 2016 when they beat Sac State. It feels like a lot of the last time UNC beat this team has come 2015 or 2016. But doesn't mean anything, but maybe, you know?
Yeah, I mean 2015 and 2016, that's definitely our benchmarks, of the D2 days, 96, 97, 98. Those were our benchmarks. And, to 2015, 10 years on that is coming up. So, it's about it's long overdue that we get back to that winning ways. Only 2 wins over Sac State, like comparatively how we do versus the rest of the conference, that's not bad. Obviously 2-14 is awful, so not the best. And I don't think it's gonna be different this year. It's just, it's a bummer that for UNC's 100th homecoming celebration, not 100th homecoming game, but our 100th homecoming as a university, just gonna a bummer that the football game is gonna be more so of a novelty.
What a good little nugget. I had no idea that this was UNC's 100th homecoming.
Well, I'm glad you don't, because my feed, that's the only promoted ad I get.
Oh.
And of course,
But
well,
yeah,
I'll be there, and we'll be celebrating, and we'll celebrate good old UNC. We'll sing "Ah, well, I remember," but at the same time, it's like I don't know, even with Marcus Fulcher, their preseason run all conference running back, having an okay year. Again, he could light it on fire and make a run for that running back title, but at the moment, they're doing just fine with Caden Bennett. He's running and throwing, and it's even though he split snaps earlier in the year, he's second in the conference for pass yards at 233 and change, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Surprisingly, second best in the conference. And then it's just I don't see a whole lot of ways that we can kind of tame the Hornets. Even if we come out with our blue and yellow smoke, I don't think that's going to get them to quit buzzing any less hard. What
Yeah.
what do you see from the Hornets, Chris?
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about how good they are. I did the work of compiling these stats, so damn it, I'm going to read them. They're second this year. Caden Bennett is the vast majority of those in pass yards, 243 a game. Third in total yards per game at 423. Fourth, it just total points per game at 32, and fourth in rush yards per game at 179. Like I mentioned a little earlier, they took a small step back from some of the numbers they were putting up last year, but they're still one of the top handful of teams in the conference, no matter how you want to look at it. And their defense is not setting the world on fire, but they're doing exactly what they need to do when you have an offense that's humming. They're pretty much mid to upper half of the conference in just about every defensive stat that really matters. Caden Bennett, he's gonna be the guy. I think this is the most balanced attack UNC's faced this year. I don't know if it's necessarily the best offense. That'll still kind of be to be seen, but definitely with what they can do in the air, on the ground, very unpredictable. I think this will be an interesting test. And you mentioned Marcus Fulcher. He's having a very, very okay year. Probably a little disappointing from what he was expecting. But Caden Bennett's more than made up for it. Marshall Martin, their all-conference tight end to start the year, he's had, quite frankly, just a really disappointing season. I think he's been battling some injuries, but he's just 8 catches for under 40 yards on the year. But even they've been getting production from the spots where they weren't necessarily expecting it, and it's worked out just fine for them.
Yeah, it is kind of a bummer that what could have been a all conference across the board type offense with Martin and Fulcher kind of hasn't really done as much as it should, but Caden Bennett has taken up the slack. Something that worries me is we're averaging 16 points a game and they're averaging 32 points a game. So just averaging double than us is not a great start.
The quick math does not look great on that.
Yeah. Basic ones and twos are looking not great for us. I know Lamb said it was going to be business as usual, and they've had 2 weeks to prepare for it. It's just looking at this, like even looking at Sac State's schedule going forward, they got Montana after us. 2 weeks later, they go to Missoula, and then 2 weeks after that, they finish their season at Davis. Those are the toughest games they have left on their schedule. I mean, they get to play us, they get to play Idaho State, they get to play Cal Poly. There's at least 3 more wins on the schedule here for the Hornets. So, I mean, 3 more wins gets them into playoff potential. A 4th one clinches it. So, we're going to be playing FCS playoff team type here unless they find a way to sting themselves, which we would all love on homecoming, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. So we'll see what happens with the Hornets, but I think we're going to have to limit Caden Bennett, and then once we limit him, like we did last week or 2 weeks ago against Weber, once we limit the quarterback, we're going to have to limit the run game. And I think there's a lot of dogs in our team that are trying, but at the same time, we still haven't gotten that production.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that Weber State loss has been sitting on their minds, especially with like 2 full weeks to kind of brew on it. And hopefully, 24-hour rule, good or bad, you dwell on it for a day, then you move on. But it's hard. Like that's much easier said than done. So I
Oh
wonder
yeah,
if there's
it's
going to be
easy to
any
say because
sort of
you
negative.
say, "Oh, it's going to be okay," and then you sit around for a Saturday where you don't have anything going on, watching everybody else, and you're like, "Man, I'm mad. I want to get out there. I want to make things better." So if they're not a little bit turned up, I would be disappointed. Even if they don't win, I'd like to see just flying around, big efforts. It's an uphill battle for sure, but if they can at least come out and put a good performance out, that'd be nice.
Yeah, it would. I mean, you wish you got a different team kind of to hop back into the ring with, but you play who's in front of you. I'm sure Lamb has been preaching this is the team you want to play. Like you want to show that last week was the first 3 quarters weren't a fluke, that you can hang with some of the better teams in the conference, whatever you think of Weber State. But it'll be a test to say the least.
I mean, iron sharpens iron is a nice idea if you actually are having some production from it. Otherwise,
That's
it's just sharp and it hurts.
well, I don't think I could think of a better way to close out that preview. So what do you say? Let's move on to the other what is it? 5 more games this week? I think right back in the driver's seat. That Montana at Idaho game is kind of the headliner, but I think the UC Davis Weber State may actually turn out to be a better game. Um, what do you think? I'm down to start with either. So pick one of those two and let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it go either way. I'm gonna let our 5 point leader take the fearless plunge into the pool first, though.
Okay, very fair. Yeah, let's I guess I should recap last week. I went 3-1, Ben went 2-2. The big deciding factor was that like our marquee matchup there with Western Carolina and Chattanooga. Um so that puts us on the year. I have 15 points and Ben's at 10. It's a little misleading though because I'm just 12-4 to you're 10-6, so we're not really too far apart. Um, but I guess let's start UC Davis at Weber State. These are both, I would say, both a little disappointing from where we thought of them coming into the year. But quite frankly, I still have way more faith in UC Davis. I think I'm I'm beginning to give up on Weber. Not, I mean, they'll probably compete and they'll do what they do, but I don't see them beating. As of right now, I don't see them beating any of the like good teams in the conference. And I would say this UC Davis game is a little less than a toss up, and I'd favor UC Davis.
Okay. Yeah. I need to make up points, so I'm gonna go Weber State.
Fair enough.
Yeah, like I like Miles Hastings 1,000 times better than I like Kylan Weiser, but having no running backs is kind of the reason they lost this last game. Not saying that Montana couldn't have won that by themselves, but I think it was a huge contribution that they didn't have the Big Sky's leading rusher at their disposal. So health wise, I don't trust UC Davis. Production wise, I don't trust Weber State. At the end of the day, availability is job security. So I'm gonna go Weber State.
All right, respect that. Okay, on to Montana at Idaho. I think coming into this season, this is another one that was probably supposed to be a little more interesting than it turned out. Um, and quite frankly, Idaho has done absolutely nothing to make me question my faith in them. And the fact that it's in Idaho, I could see if this were in Montana, you have like 26,000 like drunk, angry Montana fans like screaming at you. You're on ESPN2. I could see I could see that playing, definitely playing into it, but I think at the Kibbe Dome, it's going to be inside. They're going to be slinging the ball around. I have to go with Idaho.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, which I've been wrong more times this season than I'd like to be. But this should be the Little Brown Stein game, and if it was in Missoula, I think it might be a little bit of a 60-40. Obviously not 60 in Montana's favor. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the Spuds. Um, it's just I haven't seen enough to believe Montana's wins are quality, and Idaho's offense is just disgusting. So I think it's too easy to choose the Vandals, and if they lose on that game, that's probably going to be one of the hottest games you could lose.
Yeah, that yeah, we'll both go down if Idaho loses on that one at least. So,
Yeah.
then Eastern Washington at Idaho State. Idaho State's been frisky. I'll give them that. I think Eastern Washington has been more frisky though. I would say this is kind of both teams have played a little bit better than we expected, but we just expected Eastern Washington to start off a little better. And so yeah, I got Eastern Washington here.
So what you're saying is this bowl game should be the Friskies wet cat food bowl of like good passers and company. So yeah, I'm gonna jump on that train. I'm gonna jump on Kiko Vesperis. Um, I I like what Idaho State's doing. I just don't think they have all the pieces together. And like we talked about earlier, Eastern Washington is just unfair at reloading, and I think they get better down the stretch of the season. So yeah, go Eagles, go.
All right, yeah. So we agree on two, and we have one split there. Nice. And Portland State at Northern Arizona. Would thought this one, theme of the day, thought this one probably would have been a little more competitive when the year started. But that's really because Northern Arizona surprised a lot of us. They've looked like world beaters since conference play started. Even with that 1 point loss to Sac State, I think that definitely impressed people more than it disappointed them. Portland State's done absolutely nothing to really convince me they're better than like they're better than 8th or 9th in the conference. So yeah, this Northern Arizona pretty easy for me here.
Yeah, I'll keep my PNW hate going. Horns down, Pete's Coffee, uh, Roll Jacks. What? Yeah, I mean, it just these are two teams that neither one of them deserved any sort of faith at the beginning of the season, and Portland State has lived up to that. Other than their record win over North American, who's barely a university, and this is not North American. This is Northern Arizona. Different acronym, different, different spelling, same acronym. But yeah, NAU. This is their chance to show that they're not gonna crumble once people start believing in them. So we'll see what happens.
And so Cal Poly at Montana State, I just went ahead and put Montana State down for both of us. Was that incorrect of me, Ben?
I mean, our 1 or 2 versus 12. Yeah, I don't. This would be the biggest upset in a long time in the Big Sky. So we're gonna just roll with the Cats.
Just for fun, Montana State minus 42.5. Which
Whoa.
side?
Oh, that's a lot of points. I think they'll get bored of scoring that much. Sheesh. I'll say north of it, just for
Right,
the heck of it. Just say it's a Utah State type or a Utah Tech type game.
right. It seems it seems disrespectful to just say 42.5, but if like just think I could easily see this game being 42-0 at halftime.
Like I mean, if Montana State can do like roughly 63 on Utah Tech, yeah, Cal Poly's in the same neighborhood, a little bit worse.
All right. So, Ben, last week we had our marquee matchup from outside of the Big Sky, and I just had so much fun with that. I figured let's do that again.
It
Um,
gives me something outside of the conference to be wrong about.
the one that we kind of looked at before we started here that we both kind of thought would be most interesting was Youngstown State, or number 23 Youngstown State at number 10 South Dakota. Um, both teams have had like really one very impressive win and just a solid resume outside of that. Um, yeah, go any direction, Ben. Are you what are you feeling in this one?
Oof. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
wait,
go for
sorry. No, disregard me. I got lost in the dock and
it.
was about to say something stupid.
North Dakota versus Youngstown, that would be even more exciting. I think I think South Dakota versus Youngstown State, I'm leaning Yotes. Not because of the higher, um, not because of the higher ranking. Um, it's just traditionally I've seen good things out of South Dakota. Even when they have down years, they still find ways to be interesting. Um, and in these past couple, they've been like up, they've been down, and for them to take out North Dakota State and kind of show that they're mortal, I think that says a little bit more than it does taking out the Salukis. Um, Obviously, it's about the same ranking of opponent that they kind of skewered, but at the same time, I'm just kind of leaning towards the Yotes offense just a little bit more. I think it's just a little bit more explosive. I like them just a smidge over the Penguins.
Honestly, I was kind of leaning towards Youngstown State when we started here. I'm a sucker for some good recency bias. Um, but you laid out a very good case. I think you're right. I think that North Dakota State win is more impressive. Um, but it's no fun to agree on everything. And how are you going to make up points if we don't disagree on the big ones? So yeah, I got Youngstown State here. I think it'll be a good game. Hopefully it's not a letdown. It'll be hard to live up to that Chattanooga game last week, but I'm excited for this one.
Well, like you said, recency bias. They have the big win under their belt. That gives them the momentum even going into South
Ooh,
Dakota. So we'll see
I
what
should have
happens.
phrased it as momentum instead of recency bias. Pro tip.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, like mascot wise, I like the Penguins better. That's a pretty sick mascot, but we'll row Yotes this week.
Is there any reason that I think Youngstown? Every time I just glance at Youngstown State, I think they're an Ivy League school, and I know it's in Ohio,
Yeah,
and I don't know what about that makes me feel that way, but every time I see them, I'm like, oh yeah. And then it takes me like a half second for my brain to come around to the fact that they're just Missouri Valley, very normal, normal Midwestern school.
I think just that clean letter type logo and kind of
Oh,
just being like closer towards the east, it's just like, oh yeah, like they're probably important. They're probably a blue blood, which they are. Um, they're just not a Ivy League blue blood.
nice. Well, the other game we had kind of talked about for game of the week was aforementioned North Dakota State. They're at North Dakota. Um, quite frankly, I think it'll be a good game. I just kind of feel like that Youngstown State South Dakota game will be more competitive. This one has more of a chance of getting out of hand. Um, any big thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one's going to be the opposite of the cousin bowl that we saw uh, the last couple weeks. And North Dakota, they're a good team, the Fighting Hawks, and they sure as hell do. But at the same time, I don't think NDSU is going to let two go. And in the time, of course, we'll have to go back and do some scrubbing and fact checking and whatnot. But I don't know that North Dakota has beaten North Dakota State since they went Big Sky and came back. for that to be a first type game, or at least a not very recent type, um, not a history of success there. I don't see it happening, as much as I'd love to see North Dakota State fall further and become even a little bit more mortal. I think North Dakota State's just going to be really pissed off, and they're going to go to Grand Forks and just rip stuff off.
Oh, well, you did not. You didn't filibuster quite long enough. I was trying to see. I would. They just moved back to the Missouri Valley in 2019, and with COVID and everything, I'd honestly be surprised if they have beat North Dakota State since they moved back. Um, but we are looking at 22 right last year right now, and no, they are 0-3 since moving back to the Missouri Valley. Yeah, I kind of
I think it's
like
just
you
too
said.
tough of sledding. They're gonna have to work back up to the, to the old days of D2, where it was a little bit more back and forth.
Nice. And the other two that felt kind of interesting around the country was number 24 Albany. They're heading to New Hampshire, who's receiving votes, and then Elon's at Villanova. Both of them are receiving votes in the latest top 25 poll. Do either of those stand out?
You know, I looked through all of those resumes this past weekend as we have started participating in Redshirt Sports FCS Top 25, since there's been so much animosity, you could say, about the Craig Haley poll, the Stats Perform poll, coaches poll,
People are
whatever you want to
upset on
label
Twitter.
any of the national polls. It's been spicy, and in the past, at College Sports Journal, we would participate in the FCS Fans Nation one. This one's just a little bit easier for us. This is all sports writers. It's not 100% fan based. So I think looking at these, Albany definitely gets a little bit of the edge for me. I think they've just been a little bit more consistent, a little bit closer in their games. New Hampshire, like, even though they're 2-4, like, it was one of those I really wanted to put them in, but ultimately I put Albany and Rhode Island in at my 24 and 25. For Elon and Villanova, some good, almost type blue blood type teams. Elon lost last week, and that was rough. Villanova, they're not looking like themselves. I think that could be a coin flip. That could be easily a game winning field goal or walk off touchdown type game.
Yeah. So you should have yelled at me earlier, Ben. I was just a horrible host. We talked right before we started that I was going to cue you up to talk about that top 25 poll, and I completely spaced it. But now that we're here, let me I have yours pulled up. Let me drill you on it a little bit. How's that sound?
I was gonna say, just like a broken clock, I'm right twice a day. Unless it's a
So the
military clock,
first
then I'm screwed.
the I mean, I think the first one that's going to stand out is Harvard at number 10. Um I I'm not sure where they're at in the stats perform, but you've been kind of, I don't know if eager is the right word. You've been pretty high on Harvard, and like they've kind of shown they've proven you to be right so far. What kind of led to that number 10 ranking?
So with that one, I mean, I think a big thing that contributed into it was that 10-point win over Holy Cross. Everybody was hyping up Holy Cross. I didn't believe it. And then they play Harvard, and the worst part is it's always so difficult to gauge how well the Ivy Leagues are, because they don't participate in the playoffs. They also have um, a limited out of conference schedule. So it's really tough to narrow down exactly how good they are. I mean, there's been times where Ivy Leagues have made the top 10 in the poll, but they don't stay there just because there's other games that go on, the playoffs happen, and they eventually get moved on down. It looks like this week Harvard's at 19. So they were 4-0, and they got 367 votes. For reference, South Dakota State has all first place votes, 5-0, and they have 1,400 points. So, I think Harvard's just, it's one of those teams that's like, it's fun to put in the poll, but they're also good. It's like Princeton a couple years ago, and both of those put out NFL prospects. So it's not like it's just it's not a throwaway vote by any means, because even though the Ivy Leagues don't participate like how we all wish they would, they also still produce very quality players and quality games.
Nice. And so kind of just comparing yours with the stats perform, um you also have Western Carolina at number 4. They've been a pretty pop. They're one of those teams that people on Twitter are kind of talking about is not getting got enough respect. What what are you, what have you seen from them? You think they're a top 5 team in the country?
I think offensively they're a juggernaut, and they showed that with that 3 play, 60-yard drive to get down to the 15 and hit a chip shot to win it. Even though they should have pulled ahead further, their offense kept them in it, and they did exactly what they wanted to when they wanted to. So I think it's a bit of a Cinderella one. Um, Western Carolina and Incarnate Word are my 4 and 5. I think they're incarnate. I think they're both Cinderella teams in the fact that their rise looks really good now, but their fall, once they start losing games, will be pretty dramatic. Just because like your rise is always going to be easy, and your falls are always going to be hard. So I think they deserve respect. I think they're just a little bit better than Furman. South Dakota, I like, just haven't seen enough to put them in that top 5 type sphere. And honestly, I think North Dakota State's a bit disappointing this year. So that's why I had them at 9 to round out the top 10 for my poll.
Yeah, so I guess the last thing that was interesting, Incarnate Word at 5. I feel like that's going to anger some people. Just the Southland is just it's not very good. And Incarnate Word, I guess they haven't really proven a ton. So I know we saw them in person. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, that can anger people all they want, and I don't care, because Stats Perform has them 7. So if you want to be mad that they're still winning. But ultimately, like, their schedule, they've just been doing everything that they needed to. Like when we saw them in Greeley, they were a full team. They did everything they needed to, and never really skipped a beat from when Cam Ward left. And I mean, they got a big time guy in Zach Calzada. Thought he might have been a little bit overhyped, and then when we saw him in person,
And we
um,
watched him.
yeah, everything really just kind of fell into place, and they they played so much better than a Southland or a WAC or any of those other kind of like developing Southern conferences. They just played so much better than that. I mean, their one loss is against UTEP, which isn't a great FBS school, but at the same time, they only lost 28-14.
Yeah.
They beat us by a wide margin. um, they beat Abilene Christian, which seems like a tough team. North American, yeah, that's kind of a weenie game. Like, it's on there.
Yeah.
And then Southeastern Louisiana, they might be the best 0-5 team. Shout out, not us. Sorry, guys. But they've played so many tough games. It's kind of like when they said, who was it last year? The Vikings or the Colts, who played nine
Oh
one
yeah.
score games. And
The
they were like,
Vikings who were like 10-0 in one score games and like
yeah.
13-4 overall.
So it's like if they had just a little bit different result, um, SLU actually looks a lot better than they do. I mean, the rest of their year is not tough, so for them to stay in the top 10, they're gonna have to win out. So that's just what it is. I mean, Texas A&M, Commerce, McNeese, Lamar, Nichols, Northwestern State, Houston Christian, like, it's not a tough schedule at all. But if they keep performing well, if they keep beating tough teams, I don't see why to drop them, especially when you can perform well against a bad team and you perform well in a staggering result. I don't see why not to reward that.
I mean, you have to play who's in front of you, and they've been, for the most part, handling the bad teams the way a good team should. Well, I suppose on that note, my wife just called me, and my 60-pound dog has a bunch of stickers in her feet and won't
Ooh.
walk up the driveway. So I think I need to go need to go give her a lift. But I think that worked out pretty perfect. As always, please like, subscribe, review. Leave a comment if you like what we're doing. Leave a comment. If you don't, leave a DM in Ben's inbox. Anything else you want to close with, Ben?
No, I think we cover the entire landscape pretty well. Just to sum up from the poll, we had the Big Sky teams that I had ranked was 2
Oh, yes.
Montana State, 3 Idaho, 8 Sac State, 16 Eastern Washington, and the Grizz snuck in at 23 just because there's a lot of parity per se at 20 through 25.
And I feel like that seems fair. We've spent enough time probably talking about Montana, but like you had mentioned, kind of high teens, low 20s feels like where they should be. And they've started to, but they'll have to really prove their way up to get any further than that, I feel.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well.
Awesome. Well, we will be back next week. All you lovely people have a good one, and we will see you later.